Yo, what's going on, guys? This is BunnyMuffins. Riot was adamant about not making a B patch, but then they changed their mind because they couldn't make up their minds, so we have a B patch. Pretty much the B patch just nerfed Cavaliers, Kennen, Sett, Varus, and Lulu. Overall, the changes weren't too huge. It's really just a Sett comp that got hurt the most, but it did make room for a lot of other comps that weren't really played too much before. And that is the first comp we will be going over. So in the S tiers, the best comp by far right now is Abominations. A lot of people have been going 4 or 5 Abominations because they got buffed in the patch before, but no one really figured out the build quite yet until now because they nerfed the other comps, so they had to play something else. And yeah, this is just by far the best comp. It could be played with so many types of different carries because Abominations share a lot of synergies with other people. And then after that, Assassins, there's a lot of different variations of Assassins. They all work pretty decently, so you could do like LeBlanc, Katarina, or Nocturne. Honestly, any of them work really well. It just depends who you need items for. After that, in the A tier, we have Hellion, Spellweaver, Cavalier, Mordekaiser, and Draven combo, Legionnaires with Ribbon carry, and then Nightbringer, Yasuo. The A tiers right now, they're all very playable, some more playable than the others. However, some of these, such as like the Legionnaire and the Nightbringer Yasuo build, they're kind of like really good first place compositions if you hit them, but if you don't, they're kind of a little weak. And then the first 3 we have, which is like Hellion, Spellweaver, Cavalier, and Mordekaiser, Draven, they're a little more consistent, even though they still need like 3-star Cavaliers, for example, or Teemo for Hellion. Onto the B tier, Varus did get nerfed, so I dropped him down quite a bit from before. Same with Draconic Sett. Sett by far got the biggest nerf. I think he's like still playable, but now it's like you need to be the only person going for it, and you need to hit Draconics early, so it's a bit rare to go for these. Nightbringer, Aphelios. Aphelios, believe it or not, he still is decent. Like, a lot of people just haven't played him quite yet because all the reroll comps are really taking over the meta right now. But if you are going for 4-cost carries and you don't hit like Draven or Mordekaiser, I do recommend trying out Aphelios if you have attack damage items. After that, Abomination, Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz is still decent. He's just kind of outshined by all the other comps right now. If I'm going for an ability power comp, I'm going to be going for like Spellweaver, Cavalier instead of Vel'Koz. Renewers are pretty interesting. This is reroll Soraka. If you get like good Soraka items, a lot of Sorakas, you could try for this comp. It is really, really fun. And there are a few one tricks of this if you guys want more info on that. Invoker Karma is an interesting build. So like Karma isn't really a good carry. However, Invokers can go into Invoker Teemo really well. And that's why you play Invoker Karma. You kind of play it in the mid game, and then later on you go for the 4 Invoker build with Teemo once you hit it. It's similar to how you play Hellions, except it's not quite as a smooth transition, which is why it is lower in the tier list. After that, Kayle Knights. If you hit Kayle early, I just don't recommend this comp. But if you do hit it early, you could be playing it because then you could force the build. But if you don't hit Kayle early enough, it's like really, really weak because you kind of are stuck in the middle of like kind of in between so many different builds with no actual carry for the items that Kayle needs. After that, Skirmishers, they are in the bottom of the B tier. I don't recommend playing them, but sometimes you are forced to. And if you're the only person going for Skirmishers, and let's say you got a free Jax too, those would be the times where I would go for this composition. Rounding out the C tier, we have Forgotten Draven. Like, you don't need to do that because you could just play the other Draven version, which is in the A tier. Draconic Zyra, Draconic Ashe, they're just not that great Draconic builds right now. And then Vayne Reroll hasn't really been figured out quite yet. So that is the overview of the tier list. Let's get into how to play them, such as learning their leveling patterns, champions, and some of their counters if you're facing a lot of them. So starting off in the S tier, we have Abomination. So Abomination Spatula is really, really important. It's not mandatory, but it's, if you want to get like really high placements, pretty much guaranteed, you kind of need the Abomination Spatula. That's with Spatula plus Glove, with one of them being a Shadow. And then the 3 best items on the Abomination are Hat, Runons, and Infinity Edge. You don't have to get these, but it's really, really nice if you do. If you get 2 out of the 3 of these, I'd say you're doing pretty well. And then after that, you need to itemize a carry. Right now we have Teemo carry and Heimerdinger carry. However, you could go for so many other different things, because obviously Teemo and Heimer are legendaries. If you can't get to legendary units, you could use Draven. If you have attack damage items, you could use Vel'Koz. If you have ability power items, pretty much anything works with the Abominations as long as you have the 3 Abomination items that we talked about earlier. One thing to keep in mind is positioning. If you have Hat, it could be on either Rise or Nunu. Just make sure that if you have multiple items on your Abominations, make sure that the 3 most important ones are closer to this square over here, because that's where the Abomination spawns and that's where he takes the items from. Moving on to the next comp, we have Assassins. Assassins, you could do 4 or 6 Assassins. Both of them are honestly really good. If you're running Katarina carry, you want to run Forgotten, such as Rise, when you have Viego as well. But I listed out a couple of different items you could use in this comp if you're going Katarina, Nocturne, or LeBlanc carry. Keep in mind, you can't go for all three of these in terms of carries, because that's just a little unrealistic. It's not going to happen in too many of your games. But you can maybe go for like 1.5 of these. So you could go for full item Katarina, full item Nocturne, full item LeBlanc, like one of those three, and then maybe itemize half of one of the other ones with your spare items. That's typically what I would do, at least. So the way to play this build is if you're going for LeBlanc carry, she's a 2-cost unit, you want to roll on level 6 for 3-star LeBlanc. And then if you are going for Nocturne or Katarina carry, you want to slow roll on level 7. That's really the only difference between these two, and that's because Nocturne and Katarina are 3-cost units, and level 7 is just the best time to roll for those units. If you want to go for 6 assassins, you could take out either Coven or the Revenants. To decide on this, it depends what build you're going. If you're going LeBlanc, you could take out the Revenants. If you're going for Nocturne carry, you take out the Covens. If you're going for Katarina carry, you want to play Forgotten as well, so you have to take out both parts of them. For example, you'd remove Lissandra and Volibear to fit in Rise plus the 2 other assassins. Now onto the A tier. We have a great guide on this over here, so I won't go into too much detail, but essentially you just play Hellions early game. They win streak you through stage 2 and parts of stage 3, and then during stage 4 you have a bit of a lull, but if you go fast 8 and then roll down for Teemo and hit him, you pretty much stabilize harder than any other board possible, and then you reach a super duper strong late game because you go into some sort of Invoker build, which is just one of the strongest things you could hit ever in the late game. On to the next build, we have Spellweaver Cavalier. This comp is pretty straightforward. You get a bunch of tank items on Hecarim, get a bunch of mana and damage items on Brand, and that's pretty much your team. You just roll at 6 because one thing you might have noticed is that the 4 people in the middle here, Hecarim, Sejuani, Brand, and Victor, are all 2-cost units. So you just slow roll at level 6, hit all of them 3-star, or as many as you can, and you pretty much just win the game from there. I will say this comp is a little tough when contested, but it's still playable to top 4. You just might have trouble winning unless you get really lucky in that game. On to the next build, Draven Mordekaiser carry. This build's just like not much has changed, you know, it's just a standard Draven plus Mordekaiser plus 6 other units. Those 6 other units can be really flexible, but I like to add in at least 3 Forgotten and maybe 2 Dragon Slayer. The rest really don't matter. You could play anything that you hit. The example we have here, we have Knights, Assassins, we have a God King as well, and we have Assassin and Nightbringer. And this build uses a standard leveling pattern because we are going for 4-cost carries such as Draven and Mordekaiser. On to the next build, we have Legionnaires. So this one is with Riven Reroll. And I did a game on this if you guys want to check that out. We have the gameplay video right here. If you go to my website, BunnyMuffins.lol, you might notice like we have a lot of links to these games, so you could just go ahead and like click on them right there to get into more detail. But essentially, you just go Riven 3-star. You could go either Verdant if you do not have a Quicksilver, and if you do have a Quicksilver, you could go into something like Dawnbringers or add in like other random synergies such as Dragon Slayer and Assassins if you play Diana, such as Dragon Slayer if you add in Diana. But that's pretty much the crux of the build right there. You just go to level 7, reroll for Riven, hit Riven 3-star, and win the game after that. I will note that this comp is very 1st or 8th. If you hit Riven 3, like, there's a very high chance you're going 1st or 2nd. If you do not, you're going like bottom 4 almost for sure, unless some miracle happens. Onto the next build, we have Nightbringer Yasuo. This is kind of like in the same vein as the build before. If you hit Yasuo 3, it's a very, very strong build, but that just doesn't happen all the time. And luckily, these two builds share a lot of items between each other. They both use RFC, they both use Runons really effectively. So you could kind of flex between the two builds, see which one you hit a little more, and then go for that comp. This one does the same strategy. You slow roll at level 7, and you just go for Yasuo 3-star at that point. Onto the next build, we have Varus, which is a B tier comp. Varus got nerfed a little bit, so that's why he dropped. But the core of the build is still the same. You go for Varus 3-star by rerolling him. You could transition into a Kayle build if you are not hitting a lot of Varuses. And then you just run the front line of Ironclads with Redeems. So Rel is really good. You could run Knights such as Taric, Leona, and Darius to complement them for 4 Knights. And then in the back, I like running a little bit of Mystics. Obviously, you need Rangers, so Kindred is the best Mystic unit to use. And then after that, you could use Lulu. Before you hit this late game team comp, you could do something like 4 Rangers to hold you until you get to this point. In the next build, we have another build that got nerfed tremendously, but it's still playable. This is a Sett build. Sett's most important items are Bloodthirster and Infinity Edge, and we had a guide from one of the top 10 ranked players right now. So you guys can go to the website to check that out, or check out the video in the description below or in a card up here. Essentially what you do is you use Draconics and Reroll to get Sett 3, and then Sett 3 is used as a tool to get you to the late game. And with your late game, you can just add in any strong legendaries, and hopefully they will carry you to a first place. After that, Nightbringer, Aphelios, this is the other 4-cost comp that we could use. And if you have a bunch of attack damage items, throw them on Aphelios, and then run 4 Rangers. You definitely need 4 Rangers for this comp because he just doesn't get enough power without it. And then you do want to run at least 2 Nightbringer, but you could run more if you are able to find them. But I like running some tanks as well, so right now in this comp we have Rell, Taric, and Darius. Rell might seem a little out of place, but the reason why she's in the comp is because you often run Nautilus to transition into Darius or Taric, and then you also use Varus as an item holder in the early game. So sometimes you just have Rell too, and you could just leave her in there because she's a decent unit. But if you do want to replace her, you could put in any random strong unit and you'll do fine with that, such as maybe an extra Mystic because you already have 2 of them here. On to the next build, we have Abomination Vel'Koz. Just look at the Abomination guide. You could run Vel'Koz, but it's just not as strong as like the 4 or 5 Abomination version, which doesn't prioritize Vel'Koz as much. So on to the next build, we have Coven Renewer Soraka carry. This is a new build that I added. I replaced the Lissandra reroll build with this because they were also renewers, but Lissandra's not really a unit right now, so we play with Soraka carry instead. And you go IE, Jeweled Gauntlet, Shojin, and she just AoEs people down. It's kind of funny because she does have a supportish type of spell where she silences a bunch of units so that she increases their mana cost. However, like with this build, she just one-shots them anyways, so you don't really need the silence that badly. What you like to do is put Spirit Shojin on her so that she casts a lot, and then Jeweled Gauntlet and Infinity Edge are the best 2 damage items on her. So once you get that, you get a frontline, put a GA on Morgana. I like Fallen GA the most, and then you run the HIB combo of Heimerdinger, Ivern, Volibear for your late game. And again, you pretty much play the core build, which is Morgana, Soraka, LeBlanc, and Lissandra. Use that as a tool to get you to the late game, and then play the HIB combo. Now onto Invoker Karma. So this is another build that has a super strong late game. You use Karma as your item holder, and then you replace her, put the items on Teemo and Heimerdinger depending on what you have. Heimerdinger likes Spirit Shojin, Teemo likes Blue Buff, Jeweled Gauntlet, all that stuff. And then frontline, you have Volibear, Taric, and Garen. These are like some of the beefiest guys you could get up front. And then of course you have the Ivern to complement everyone to give you Renewer, Invoker, and Revenant. Like Ivern's pretty much like one of the best stat bots in the game because, or trait bots in the game because he has so many good ones and he's a decent unit on his own as well. Going on to the next build, we have Kayle Knights. I know this is the favorite of a lot of players on my channel, but I just really can't recommend going for this. It's so risky to do, and it's not even like that strong once you get it. And the reason why is because you'll often be at very low HP by the time you hit it, so it's just very weird to play. Like some games you get away with it, and then you see that it wins, and you're like, wow, this is the best comp ever. But the game just doesn't give you this comp that often, which is why I don't really like going for it. Also, if you build like a Rageblade, you can pretty much only go for Kayle. There are a couple other units who can use it, such as Aphelios, but that's not even the strongest comp either. So if you're going for like flexing between Kayle and Aphelios, for example, it's just not the best thing to do. I'd rather flex between stronger comps, such as like an S or A tier comp if they share the same items. But if you do end up hitting the Kayle, and then you build her items later. Let's say you got a bunch of tank items early and you just built your tanks, and then later on you get a Kayle, and then you get a Rageblade from Carousel. Maybe go ahead and try her, because that is one way where it would work, where it doesn't really punish you that badly. On to the next build, we have Skirmisher. I think this is the last build in the B tier. So you just go the typical Skirmisher nonsense that we've been going all the time before. It is a lot nerfed. However, since now only 1 player is going for it instead of 3 or 4, it's a lot easier to hit, so I really only recommend going for this comp if you hit it for free. I wouldn't really force it from the beginning of the game, if that makes sense. That is it for the B tier. Onto the C tier, just don't play these. Like I've said why before, don't play Forgotten Draven, play the other Draven version, and you could transition into this build also. It's not like bad, but it's just not that great. Draconic Zyra, don't do that, don't do Ashe, and don't do Vayne. So that is pretty much it for the comps. Onto the items. Like, I think it's pretty similar to what it was last week. I like Tier a lot for the brand comps and the assassin comps. I like Bow because that builds a lot of good items for like Riven, Yasuo, Abominations. Sword, same deal there. And then Belt is just like a good item because Warmogs is so strong in this set. And then after that, Glove is pretty flexible. Rod, not that great. Chain, it's okay. And then Negatron, it's probably just always been the worst item in the game. If you want to look at the item quadrant, you can. However, I do recommend just looking at the items on whatever comps you're playing, because based on what champion you're using, items are going to be very specific to that champion. That's like the pattern I've noticed this set. Like, there isn't really any good way to do like an item tier list, in my opinion, because it's so champion dependent in this current set. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the patch today. If you guys are interested in more meta snapshots, I update these every Friday. And I come out with gameplay guides. I work with other players who are like high challenger, world finalists, all that type of good stuff. So if that is of interest to you, go ahead and subscribe below if you have not already. And if you are already subscribed, go ahead and maybe share it with a friend who is just getting started in TFT. I'm going to be starting a new series where I am coaching my friend who just started playing like yesterday. And I'm going to update you guys how he's doing either every once a week or every 2 weeks. And we're just going to track his progress there. We're going to see what guides he's been reading and what types of comps he's been playing. So if you guys are new, you definitely want to subscribe to check that out, because you guys might improve a lot in the same ways. So definitely look out for that. But apart from that, I will see you guys later.